We've been doing this for how long? Well, we're going to talk about that and more on today's episode of the Geek Watch podcast.
This is the Geek Watch podcast with Brian Hatcher and Mandy Petrie.
Greetings, Geek Watchers, and welcome to episode 200 of the Geek Watch podcast. I'm Brian Hatcher, and with me, as always, Geek Watch's own resident geek goddess, Mandy Petrie.
200.
We crossed the line. 200 episodes.
200 episodes.
We've gone through the fire and the rain and the plague, but we've made it, and so hopefully another 200 is in the future,
Right?
And hopefully we'll be out of a strike. And so we can actually start talking about it, because obviously we would be talking about a couple episodes of a particular show that involves a Norse god of chaos and trickster, and we would be talking about that.
But we won't,
But we're not going to.
because we're good little podcasters who follow the rules.
But we are going to talk about the strike because, oh, good Lord. And I know you were telling me before we got started that you hadn't heard anything yet. The talks broke down yesterday. The AMPTP walked out. They just walked away from the table. They said that there's too much of a difference between what they want and what SAG-AFTRA wants. They said there's no point in even talking about it. They just walked. And they said, and here's the thing, is because I've been following all of this and trying to read everything that both sides are saying. Obviously, I don't have the contract. I don't know what contract was offered. The AMPTP said that the contract was very similar to what they offered the Writers Guild.
Right?
SAG-AFTRA said, no, it wasn't.
Oh.
Not even close. In fact, they said that it was a worse contract than what they put in front of them before the strike started. They lowballed them, apparently, according to SAG-AFTRA, which that's a bottle with a message. And the message is, we don't care about you guys anymore. It's like, this contract we just gave you, this is as good as it's going to get, and it ain't going to get this good again. So they're definitely trying to hardball SAG-AFTRA. I mean, that takes a lot of guts to put a contract in front that was worse than what started the strike in the first place. It feels to me like,
I mean, do they think they have some kind of trump card over these actors, or?
they must have, because, again, I haven't read what the contract offered, but apparently what SAG-AFTRA was saying was the AI issue was off the table. There was no AI protections at all. The WGA got those AI protections, but it wasn't even on the table. It wasn't in the contract at all. And that was weird to me, because I would have thought that would have been ultimately, that's a big deal for all the strikers, whether it was the WGA or it was obviously SAG-AFTRA. That was a sticking point. And that the AMPTP didn't even consider that in the contract. That they weren't even going to debate that. You had to know going into it that they weren't going to agree to that. It just seems to me like the AMPTP went to the table in bad faith, because they had no intention of getting a contract done. Either that, or they were, again, saying that we're just going to keep sending you worse ones until you have to take whatever we give you. And that's troubling.
Yeah.
Because look how long it took them to get back to the table, and the AMPTP just walked out. It takes months to get the negotiations going again. And if the AMPTP is not going to be willing at least to talk about AI, there's no point in having any kind of a discussion, because that's non-negotiable. We've talked about that before, and why, if you're SAG-AFTRA, you can't allow AI actors. You just can't. And the AMPTP, they were saying that SAG-AFTRA were asking for $800 million more a year from the studios, to which SAG-AFTRA said that's not even close. That's like 60% more than what we were asking for in the contract. And they said the AMPTP don't want to give us any AI protections. They don't want to give a cost of living increase. They don't want to give up any money at all. Where do you go from there? There's Somebody is going to have to say, okay, we're just going to have to bite the bullet. And it's not going to be SAG-AFTRA because it can't. Again, we've talked about this before. It's like their backs are to the wall. They can't agree to not getting more money on the streaming side of things. They can't agree to
live.
Yeah. Yeah, they can't agree to allowing AI actors. They can't.
There's no subsisting there with what's going on right now.
Yeah. And again, especially with what I know of Hollywood, and that's not a lot, but I do know that the writer is always the bottom of the barrel.
Yep.
And if you're going to give the writers AI protections, you can't expect to go in with a contract for SAG-AFTRA and not give them AI
Give the
protection.
same to the actors, right?
Yeah, and I thought,
Especially at this point when AI is so bad at making humans so bad.
Well, it's like they're doing better and better. But it's like we talked about before, using AI to create crowd scenes, that hurts young actors, not because the day rate is just so good that they're making all this money on it, but it's like we talked about before, that's the way that a lot of people get on a set and they learn how a set works. And everybody starts out that way. The story about
bottom floor, yeah.
Yeah, the story of Brad Pitt, who was a day player, and he was in a scene where he was a background, and he said something in the background, and they yelled cut, and he said, if you say anything again, you're out of here. They almost threw Brad Pitt off a set for talking. But again, he was, at that point in his career, he was a background character. He was, right. But he needed to be, even Brad Pitt had to pay his dues. But that ability to be able to get on a real live set and see how things work is part of the process. Again, that's more valuable than $100 a day you might get standing around in a crowd. And that's just like the low level of the issues that SAG-AFTRA have with AI, which of course they're going to. Mm-hmm. There's a ton of problems with it. Stunt work. And like you say, these AI actors aren't quite there yet, obviously. But even if they were to get there, still, there's nothing better than live. Actors are going to make choices. Mm-hmm. And actors tend to make better choices when they're acting than a programmer will. Mm-hmm. That's just the way that it is. So AI may look great, but it's never going to really replace an actor. And the problem that I'm seeing is that it seems like the AMPTP believes that it's going to. That's going to be an issue, obviously. And there's no coming back to the table unless the AMPTP is willing to talk about AI. And they're going to have to give the actors the same protections they gave to the writers.
Right.
And that, for me, I thought when the WGA got their agreement and AI was in the contract and AI was taken out of the equation, I thought, well, if they start talking to SAG-AFTRA, then obviously the AI issue is solved because you can't go to the table. And it's like, well, apparently you can. Yeah. But obviously you're not going to get a contract out of that. You're just
and this is going to be, I think about video games where motion capture is so important.
Yeah.
And all the actors that put forth to there and make those characters relatable and able to connect with their, I don't know if you'd call it an audience or players or how gamers, but that's just as important.
Oh, yeah. And it's like you say, even a lot of these AI computer-generated characters, they have these motion capture artists.
You still have the human inside there.
Yeah, exactly. And you're modeling off of them. That's a huge part of it. So your best characters, at their core, there's a human being puppeting them.
Like R2-D2.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a human in there. And so we totally know what he's feeling, what's going on, even though he's just a trash can that his head moves around. It's as if he has a soul.
Exactly, because technically they do. Mm-hmm. It's a complicated situation, and in a lot of different realms, I'm starting to see where technology is becoming trickier. Mm-hmm. Not to go too far off a topic, but just in people's day jobs. I remember when I was a youngster a long time ago, it was possible to do a job that didn't require you to use a computer. Nowadays, I can't think of a job that you would do that doesn't require you to use a computer, at least sometimes. Mm-hmm. And the thing about it is that means you have to be computer literate. It's at a point now where it's like, could someone who couldn't read get a job. It'd be extremely difficult, if not impossible. Well, being able to use a computer is the same boat now. You can't even be a janitor without being able to check your email. Technology is becoming more ubiquitous in our daily lives. Really, that started with GUIs, graphic user interfaces, so that you didn't have to code to use a computer. And then when the internet rolled around, that really started to things up. We're at a point now where the technology is not a question of what can we do with it, it's what should we do with it.
Right.
So, of course, we have to discuss this issue with AI. And the fact that Marvel, and we'll talk a little briefly about Marvel because we're talking about AI. And, they did Secret Invasion, and their opening, they used AI to create. And there has been AI used in that little Marvel show involving a Norse god. And they've taken heat for that as well.
Yeah.
And right now, since the AMPTP looks like they're stonewalling everyone when it comes to the actors, they're getting to a place now where it looks like they're prepping writers and writers are preparing. And it's not really betraying actors because actors will need something to act on
when they do get back to
when
work.
they get back. So it's not really stabbing the actors in the back for the writers to go back to work. In fact, it's helpful. Even though, and like we talked about last week, there are writers on the picket lines that are marching with SAG-AFTRA. So the support is still there. Even as a writer, you have to know if you're trying to not just protect your job, but protect the business itself. Because, again, a Hollywood that runs off of AI is not going to be as good as that has real writers, real actors, and all of that. And it's basically protecting your art form. Writers have to know, and it seems that they certainly do, that you got to deal with this AI problem everywhere, wherever it is a problem. Because if it's a problem anywhere, it will be a problem everywhere. And we talked about this whole idea of training AI off of actual people's work, which is just the same as what we were talking about with these AI actors these human in motion capture suits that have created these iconic characters through their own performances.
Andy Serkis.
Andy Serkis is the perfect example of this because Gollum, first of all, but Caesar. And he was the motion capture for King Kong. He's done a bunch of motion capture stuff. And Andy Serkis, the performer, is just as important and maybe even more so to that AI performance than the computer that generated the stuff around him. So even with AI, you still need the human actor. And I feel like the AMPTP
doesn't understand that.
They don't understand it. They don't get it. And they see streaming as being their cash cow. And they want to hold on to every dime they're getting from it. But they're doing it off the backs of actors who are
making money for them.
Yeah, or trying to. The irony of all of this is why the actors' strike is not going to go as long as it could, and why the writer's strike ended when it did. It's the same reason why there was an issue in the first place, which was computers.
Yep.
Having AI is a problem. But at the same time, having social media and being able to give yourself a platform to talk to the masses as easily as actors and writers can do now because of social media like Facebook and
thin
YouTube.
Line between tool and weapon.
Well, they certainly know how to use Medium, and it's helped them a lot. And it's all really going to matter. Again, it's like the AMPTP. What cards do they think they're holding? Is this a bluff? Are they trying to cower SAG-AFTRA into agreeing on a contract that's not going to be in their best interest? Do they think that they're going to be able to hold out long enough that they can drive the actors into either having to scab or take like a really crap deal? Maybe some people scab. Hopefully not. But I just don't see how SAG-AFTRA can accept anything less than what they're asking for because,
They
again,
cannot live.
they can't live, and it's going to be harder and harder to make a living as a working actor with what they're being offered. And especially, like I say, you have these CEOs who are making incredible amounts of money, crazy amounts of money. You have to look at that and go, well, it's like there's a lot of hardworking people that help develop and create these television shows and movies that these studios are making all this money from. And it's not even a matter of that we need to make sure that all these people get mansions. They just got to get a meal every day. And it's almost impossible.
Keep their water turned on.
Keep their rent paid. And again, California is like one of the worst places money-wise to live because it's so expensive. It's not getting any better. Now, like I said, this may take a while because, again, with the AMPTP walking away and saying, until you get closer to what we're wanting to do, we're not interested in even talking to you. You've got the AMPTP holding their cards. You've got SAG-AFTRA holding their cards. So who is going to make the next bet into the pot? Well, I guess we'll see.
We shall see.
And with that said, we come to the end of episode 200.
200.
Yes. Thank you for listening, and tune in next time for the latest in geek news and views with the Geek Watch podcast. For Mandy Petrie, this is Brian Hatcher, reminding all the Geek Watchers out there, we're all geeky about something. Be proud of yours. And thank you for listening for all these years. Let's do another 200. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Geek Watch podcast. If you enjoyed this program, don't forget to like and subscribe on your preferred platform and share this podcast on your social media. For links to all the ways you can listen to the Geek Watch podcast, as well as leave comments and suggestions, visit our website at geekwatch.net. The Geek Watch podcast is a Hanging J production.